In part 4, we cleaned and tested both mirror motor assemblies and verified that they're functioning properly. The next and final thing on the troubleshooting list is the ECU. First, we'll test all of the interfaces between the ECU and its various components. Then we'll test the ECU itself. On B188, we've got the inspection of the mirror ECU. First test is inspect mirror ECU circuit. It requires us to have both terminals A and B unplugged, which we do. And a quick note on this page, the diagrams that they provide for connectors B and A, they're kind of backwards in the sense that this is the hot side, the part that plugs into the ECU. We're going to be testing on the back side of these connectors, on the wire side. It's better to refer to this page that shows the connector diagrams. It has connector A, connector B on it, and you'll notice that terminal 1 is in the upper right corner on both of them, whereas on B188, terminal 1 is in the upper left corner. It's best to basically ignore these diagrams that are on the test page and just look at the ones on that other page. First things first, set the multimeter to continuity, test our leads. This first test that's listed is wrong. It says A1 to A2 originally, but that should be A3 to A2. The reason for that is that A1 is the horizontal power for the horizontal motor. A2 is power for the vertical motor. So it doesn't really make sense to be testing continuity between A1 and A2. There's a shared ground for those two. That's on A3. So it makes more sense to test A3 against both A1 and A2. I'll show you what happens if we do the test as it's written. So this is A1 up here, this mint green wire, and right next to it is A2. That's not going to give us continuity. There's some resistance between those two, but that doesn't really mean anything. What means more is to touch the ground. That's the shared ground for the two motors. Likewise, the second test on the list is between vertical power and ground. Instead of doing just a plain old continuity test, I want to send some power over these wires and verify that everything's working as expected. A1 is the horizontal power for the right mirror, and A3 is the shared ground for both motors on the right mirror. So I got 13.5 volts running on my AC power source, and I'm gonna give some power to that wire. I'm going to touch this ground and see what happens. Yep, I can hear the motor. That's nice. And then the normal behavior is you can flip the polarity and send it back the other way. All right. So now I'm going to move the positive probe over to A2, which is our vertical motor on the right mirror. And we'll give it the juice. I hear the motor. Now I'm going to flip polarity. Yep, appears to be working. I don't think I mentioned, the first two tests were on the right mirror. Test 3 and 4 here are on the left mirror. And A10 is the ground that's shared between the two motors. A8 is the horizontal power input to the motor. A9 is vertical power to the other motor. So when you do the same kind of test, this is down on the lower row. So that orange wire, in my case, is the shared ground for the left-hand motors. That's the horizontal power on the left-hand side, vertical power on the left-hand side. Now let's test the left-hand mirror's motors. We'll start with horizontal. That's A8. Now I'm going to just add my 13 plus volts to these two probes, and the left-hand mirror should move. Yeah, I hear it moving. Now I'll flip polarity. And we're going to move power over to the vertical motor on A9. Look up our power. Sounds good. Flipping the polarity. Going back the other way. Good. So that checks off the first 4 tests on this sheet. The next test is A11 to ground. A11 is the ECU ground. So A11 is this big fat wire here on the bottom row. I'll just touch this grounded bolt. That's good. Now this test, A12 to A13, this is about the sensors. A12 is the sensor ground, and A13 is sensor power. A12 is right there, next to it is 13. And I'm not surprised we're not getting continuity on those. Testing A12 to A13 is questionable. Let's use the multimeter to verify. There's port 12, that's the ground for the sensors. Right next to it, A13 is 5-volt power. So we got 5 volts on the DC power supply. I'm gonna send that 5 volts to terminal A13 on the harness connector. I'll go ahead and ground that. So that should be juicing up all 4 sensors, 2 on each mirror. And then we're gonna set this to DC20. I'm gonna clip my multimeter ground onto the same ground. We ought to be getting some voltage coming back on the sensor output wires. A15 is showing 1.55 volts. That would be appropriate for a sensor. And then that was the vertical, and then the horizontal is 2.02 on the left mirror. Right mirror, holy buckets. Let's see if I can get in there. That wire 1, 2, 3 is the voltage coming back from the sensor, vertical. And then I gotta snake through and get that other terminal. We got 2.17 on horizontal sensor. So that's better than a continuity test if you ask me. And then next on the list is A16 to star. And that asterisk means that we're going to terminal 1 of 18 on the tilt and telescopic ECU. And on an automatic car, that ECU is going to be just over to your left on the kick panel. However, my car has a stick, so I have to go remove the glove compartment to get at that tilt and telescopic ECU. So let me go do that. To get this panel down, there are 2 push-in fasteners up here that just pop out. I don't know if this pinecone style is original or not. That's what's in there right now. With those fasteners out of the way, the next step is to just pull this down. There are clips that hold it in. 2, 3, 4. There are 2 little square covers here that are hiding screws that we have to remove. There's a plastic clip on either side of it. Oh, that popped out easier than I expected. All right, so then these are Phillips screws in here. Now there are 2 other screws down below here that we got to take out. It's just like the other 2 from above. Now, the glove box is basically free, but it still has some things connected to it up here. So one trick is to pop down this wire connector for the airbags, I believe. You got to drop it down and then feed it back up through that hole. And it will pass through that hole. You also got to disconnect some wire harnesses. The switch harness is right up front here. It's a little easier to reach. Press in the tab and release it. And then the actual courtesy light harness is back here. It's the gray one. The next step is to remove this metal portion of the dashboard frame. It has 4 10mm bolts at each corner. There's one way down in there, one here. And there's the panel. And then finally we got to take out this plastic duct for the air conditioning. It just has this one Phillips screw holding it right here. And then this should drop down and then slide off. And there is the tilt and telescopic ECU. So for this particular continuity test, we have to connect A16 from connector A on the power mirror ECU to terminal 1 of 18 on the tilt and telescopic ECU. If we go back to this page, the E185 shows the tilt and telescopic ECU connector. And terminal 1 is in the upper right corner when you have the release tab at the top. And there's our release tab. The upper right corner is a black wire, it looks like. So we'll insert our negative probe on terminal 1. This is terminal 16. Excellent. The first piece to go back on is this air conditioning duct. It has one screw that fastens it. First thing you do is slip on that end. And then align this end. Pop into place. You can add the screw. Okay. The next piece to go back on is this piece of the dash frame. It's just bare metal. The upper part has these little tabs on it that you'll use to align on these upper brackets. And then there are 4 bolts, 10mm head bolts, that fasten this on. That one back there is a little tricky to get at. So I'm using an extender on a 10mm socket. And then we can put our glove box back in. We gotta hook up some things though. So you got this opening at the top, and it receives this, I think it's an airbag connector or whatever. Don't want to monkey with that. And then we've got some courtesy lights, and I believe the black one should go on first. Wire harness. And then the gray one. All right, that one's in. So we got this airbag connector, and all these guts, the yellow parts, are going to be pointing up. In other words, you won't be able to see them from inside the glove compartment. So I got to feed this thing down into the glove box, and then I'll pop it up into place. Maybe if I tip it up. Have these screws. It's probably a good idea to get those threaded so I can let go of the glove box. Not putting it in all the way yet. So this panel has a little tang on the back edge here, and then there are clips on this end of it for popping in. So I'm gonna hook that tang in first, get that end positioned, and then pop this end in. Under the dash, we got one screw is gonna go here. It threads into a white plastic fitting. So just be careful not to over torque it. And the other screw goes over right up in here. Same deal, it's got a white plastic fitting. So then I'm going to finish tightening up these screws. And then there are two little plastic squares that cover up those screws. Little tabs go left and right. Orient it this way. There we go. Finally, we have this panel that goes under the dash on the passenger side. And you'll see it has these two holes, and those line up with this spot here and this black one over here. And then the panel also has these four clips along the top edge, and they fit into these slots or holes. There are four of them. So just line up the clips with the holes, pop them in. With that in place, we can pop in the plastic fasteners. They're just a pressure fit, like that. Then we got these B connectors. These are doing a continuity test on the switch. So I guess this is actually double testing the harness that we just tested. But the point is, when you have the switch on the armrest in a given position, you will get continuity across ports within the B block. We're gonna try that. B1, B2, we're gonna start with. B1 was the pink guy. B2. So right mirror switch on down. Should give us continuity when the right mirror goes down. B1 to B4. So that's 3 is just below 1, so go over 1 more for 4. Right mirror to the right. Bingo. Now B1 to 5. would be the left mirror to the right. Good. B1 to B6. Opposite corner over here is left mirror down. Already on left mirror. Now we pop over to B3 to B2. It's up there. B3 to B2 is the right mirror in the up position. Good. B3 to B4. B4 is right next to B3. And that is right mirror switch to the left. Right mirror left. B3 to B5 is left mirror switch to the left. Excellent. B3 to B6. Left mirror switch up. All right. So all those B's tested fine. So then we have a couple of voltage tests down here. Well, 3 actually. A4 to ground. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Gets a probe. And I think we should get battery power here. Yep, 12.67 volts, sounds about right. Who's next? A7. A7 is at the end. All right, there's A7. And we're gonna go to ground again, but we have 2 tests, one with the ignition switch on accessory and one with it off. On accessory, we should get battery voltage. And with this ignition off, we should get no voltage. So let's do it backwards. I don't have the ignition switch on yet. We got zeros, and we still have zeros. Where are you, ignition? Switching to accessory. And repeating the test. 12.16. All right, I'm gonna call that good. This test part 2 requires the connectors to be attached, and we need to ground all of these connections and do voltage tests. I'm gonna reinstall terminal A. Just slide it up. Push it in place till it clicks. Likewise for B. Done. My negative lead isn't particularly long, so I'm going to use one of these jumper wires that I used earlier, connect it to my negative probe, and then hook that on a known good ground. I'll set my voltmeter at DC 20. A1 terminal is this first mint green wire in the upper corner. It doesn't explicitly say here to turn the ignition switch to accessory, but the ECU doesn't get juice unless you do that. A1 ground, right mirror, switch to the left. Nothing. Okay, we'll go to A2. A2 is the next green, mint green wire. All right, there's A2. Right mirror, switch up. Nothing. A3. A3. There's A3. A3, right mirror switch to to the right or down. Right, down. Nothing. Goose eggs. A5 ground. Got 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 is on the opposite, just over the other side of that release clip. I think I can snake in through here. A5. Oh, got some juice on this one. A5 to ground. Right mirror to leftmost position should get us down under 1 volt. Right mirror, leftmost. Nothing's happening. The motors aren't engaging, but the sensor's reading something. Let's see what A6 does. A6. There we go. A6. Still on the right mirror. Nothing. But that's a sensor reading, that 1.22 volts. I'll just keep moving on. But it looks like we got a bad ECU. This here is A8 to ground. Left mirror switch to the right. Left mirror switch. Moving to the right, we get nothing. A9. A9 is right next to A8. A9. Left mirror switch up. Nichts. A10. So that's that orange wire, I guess. A10. Left mirror switch, left or down. Left, down, right, up, nothing. That's 16, 15, 14. There's 13. I'm showing 4.85 volts. A13 to ground. Right or left mirror switch to any position except off should give me about 5 volts. That's off. Still got 5 volts. Right. Huh. Well, I'm getting a steady 4.85 volts regardless. 14. Got 1.83 volts already on the meter. A14. So we do a left test and a right test on the left mirror. Voltages should change. Left mirror, leftmost. Nothing's going on. Up and down. Nothing. 15. 15. Got 1.75 on the meter. Lower, upper, nothing. Right, left, makes no difference. So that's all the A block tests. I have to switch over to B block. First one up is B2, which is this mint green wire. And B2 says we should have a constant approximate voltage of 5 volts. I got 4.4. B4 next. That's B3, so this is B4. I'm showing 4.73 volts, which is even closer to 5. Now we go to B5, which is here. B5. 4.34 volts, it's a little lower. Kind of in the ballpark. Finally, B6. 4.31 volts. That seems kind of close to 5. But either way, all those connector A tests essentially failed. So I'm guessing we got a bad ECU. Well, I'm about to dive in there and go get the ECU out. I'm going to use this stubby 10mm wrench, combination wrench. I found this works best because it's short. There's not a lot of room in there, and when you want to swing that wrench, this is about the best thing you got working for you. I'm also going to use this tool to unhook some of the wiring connectors. The first thing to do is to remove these connectors. What I'm going to do is hook this guy in with my left hand, use my right hand to release that tab. And I'm going to go back and forth between these two ridges and just walk the connector out a little bit at a time. You really got to pinch that tab in too. If you don't, you're just going to be fighting against it. That's coming. A little bit at a time. Ouch. Poke myself with my hook. There we go. There's A. I guess I'm going to take a B off first. It's a little easier. Okay, made that look easy. There are two screws holding this thing in, and then a bracket that just sticks into a tab. So you can get at this bottom one pretty easily. The top one's a Bearcat, so it might help to give a little play by taking out this lower one first. And allows you to wiggle it, you see, around a little bit. There you go. That other screw, you can't even see it. You can only touch it. You gotta just turn it a little bit at a time. Be prepared for this to take a while. Your arms might get a little scraped up doing this because it's extremely hard to reach. And then finally, if you can try not to drop the screw. Ow, got a little scraped up. There's the other little CAD screw. And now the ECU is free. All right, there it is. Part number 89430-24020. That's the one. First, I shopped around for a replacement ECU on carpart.com, but I figured it would be safer to buy one from eBay, since they have a well-defined return policy. I bought a used ECU and installed it in the car. Based on suggestions that I read in the Lexus forums, I tried reinstalling the notoriously difficult upper mounting screw by removing the center console and head unit. That turned out to be a dead end, so I next tried reaching in behind the instrument cluster. All I managed to do was drop the screw several times before giving up. It was all for naught, however, because the ECU was defective. Nothing. After successfully returning it, I purchased another ECU. Well, I've learned the hard way that installing a new ECU and hoping that it works is probably not your best strategy. So with this one, I'm going to perform a few bench tests. And those tests will come from page BE 189, the Inspect Mirror ECU operation. Can't do all of them, but there are a few of these output tests like on A13 and some of these B terminals that we can check before putting this unit in the car. And the way that I'm going to do that is by using connectors that have been snipped off an old harness from a junkyard ECU. And I know which wires are which by looking at this page, BE 185, that shows connector B, connector A from the ECU. And those are the connectors I have here. Of course, using the schematic, I can determine which wires do what. So let's start with terminal A. I don't even have to plug it in all the way. We've got to power up the ECU. And you can see from this diagram that battery power comes in over 2 two terminals, A4 and A7. Those are these terminals here. The upper left corner, that's A7, and this one towards the middle is A4. And I've gone ahead and twisted them together. I'll go ahead and clip power on that pair of wires. And then A11 is the ground. A11 is this big 18 gauge wire that's down about towards the middle of the center of the bottom row. A11 is connected to the case of the ECU as well through one of these screws. So you could ground to the case or to A11. Okay, so we have our positive inputs and our ground hooked up. That means that by adding some voltage, wire A13 should now have approximately 5 volts, according to BE 189. A13, that's the sensor power wire for all 4 sensors on the 2 mirrors. It sends out approximately 5 volts. This wire here is A12, and it's the ground for the sensors. Then we'll bring in our positive probe and test A13, and we've got 5.1 volts. All right, that's a good test. And I'm gonna go ahead and just ground on the case for the next tests. Now what I want to do is test B2, B4, B5, B6, also for approximately 5 volts. B2 is in the upper left corner, 4.66 volts, not bad. B4, 4.73, B5, 4.63, and B6, 4.63. So that is also a good test. So far, this looks like a good ECU. Well, after a successful bench test on this new ECU, I gotta run all these tests again. Test number 2 on BE 189 for the ECU. And rather than bolt it straight into the car and hope that it works, I'm gonna just plug it in and ground it out using a jumper cable. Make it a little easier to access it. It's less work in case the ECU doesn't pass its test. All right, so let's plug it back in. Then all we need is a ground. Tell you what, we're gonna stick our body ground right there on the case. I should still be able to access these ports okay. And I'll hook this big clip on known good ground. In order to run these tests, I gotta turn on the ignition to the accessory position. That way the ECU is powered up. And I'm gonna set this to DC 20 because we're checking voltage. Then I'm gonna use an alligator clip on my voltmeter ground, so I can likewise ground this on the case. What's the first thing? A1 to ground. We should get battery voltage when we move the right mirror switch to the left. Voltmeter positive goes on A1. Grounds are still good. I got my voltmeter on. Now, if I switch the right mirror switch to the left, we should get battery voltage. I got my switch to the right mirror, and then I'm pushing the joystick to the left. Oh yeah, 1237, that's battery voltage, and I heard the mirror moving. So that's a very good sign. Let's move over to A2. It's gonna tighten here. We got A2 to the ground. Now we gotta move the right mirror switch to the up position. Still on right mirror. Up. Yep, battery voltage. And I hear the mirror moving. Excellent. Next thing up is A3 to ground, and the right mirror switch right or down. A3 is right there. It's the shared ground for the two motors on the right mirror. And that ground does double duty. When you switch the polarity, the ground becomes a positive. So A3, right mirror switch to the right or down. Right mirror switch to the right or down. Excellent. The next test is A5, which is the right hand horizontal sensor output. When we move the right mirror to the left, we should get down in that range of voltage. We move the right mirror to the right, we should be up in that voltage. A5 is this blue wire with the white line on it. And that should be bringing back the horizontal sensor output, which at the moment is there at 1.68. If we move the right mirror to the left, that right hand horizontal sensor should go down under 1. Right hand mirror to the left. It's dropping. It's maxing out. It's not going under 1 though. Huh. If we move the right hand mirror to the right, we should get a number up above 2.8. Right hand mirror to the right. Right mirror to the right. Should get up to 2.8, and we're not. Next thing on the list, A6, which is the right hand vertical sensor output. A6. I think I'm gonna have to get a new probe because I just broke it. A6 is this green wire for me. I'm getting a reading. This is the vertical right mirror switch down. Maxed out. Not quite where we want to be. Right mirror switch up. That ought to drop down under 1 as well. It did. So the next thing on the list is A8, which is the horizontal motor on the left mirror. A8 is on the bottom row of A terminal. Over here in this corner. And A8, when the left mirror switch is going to the right. Left mirror going to the right. Why am I getting zeros? Moving to the left, I get battery juice. Left mirror switch to the right. Huh. Well, it's working. Maybe the instructions are wrong. A9. A8 is right next to A9. A9, left mirror up. So this is vertical. Left mirror, vertical. Battery voltage. And then A10, which is the shared ground for the left motors. As I said on the right one, the ground for the motor plays double duty as a power as well when you switch polarity to change direction. In other words, the ground for the motors is not the same ground as the ECU or anything else. There we go. Left mirror switch, either left or down, should give us battery voltage. Let's switch to either left or down. Right gives us voltage. Down gives us voltage. Up does not, left does not. Right does, down does. A13 is the shared power for all 4 of the sensors, 2 on each mirror. A13 is right there. There, I think I got it. So A13 should be giving us 5 volts. It's just basically a constant power source for the sensors. And keep in mind that the car's not turned on right now, so we're just drawing battery power. If there were alternator power, that number would probably be higher. We might try that later though. A14 is the left-hand horizontal sensor output. A14 is right next to A13, of course. I'm getting 1.94 volts from that horizontal sensor. So now we're going to put the left mirror to the left. Maxed out. We're not quite up into that 2.8 range. I'll try going to the right. Voltage should drop under 0.9. It didn't. And we got A15, which is the left-hand mirror vertical sensor output. There we go. And I've got some voltage showing up. Left mirror up and down. Let's try lowermost position first. Maxed out. Didn't get very high. Up. Now we're down in the correct range. That's it for all the A tests. Now we're back to the B tests. These are all just going to be juice 5 volts of power sent to the mirror switch to signal back to the ECU on B1 and B3. We're upside down, so there's B1, this is B2. B2 is showing 4.64 volts. B4 is 4.72 volts. B5, 4.61. And B6 is 4.61. Now, I want to test a theory. I'm going to run all these same tests with the car on. And that way we'll have alternator voltage, which should affect these outputs a little bit. Let's see what we're getting on that B block. Alright, so here's B2 again. And 4.73 volts. Now B4, 4.8, a little higher. 4.69, I think was a little higher. B6, 4.69. What about that sensor power on A13, sorry. A13. Yeah, now see, now we're getting just over 5 volts. Before we were getting under 5. Let's try one of our outputs. We got A14. Let's try A14. At present, we got 1.13 volts. A14, left mirror, horizontal tests. We're going to the left. Numbers are going up. And we're still not getting quite into that range, that expected range. Now I'm going to the right. I should get below 0.9. Still not. We'll move you over to A15, which is vertical. Let's go down first. Make that number go all the way up. Up, up, up. Just barely. Didn't quite make it to 2.8. Now we're going down. And we're under 0.9, so that's good. For fun, let's see what happens when we go back to, let's say, one of the mirrors. We'll go back to A1. See, we had battery power before without the car running. Just curious what kind of number we'll get. Right mirror switch to the left. Yeah, we're up at 14.37 volts. All right, well, the good news is our mirrors are moving. I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this thing in. To install this new ECU, I'm just gonna use one of the screws, and that's because of the two, the top one is damn near impossible to get in. I'm going to install the lower one, and that'll be enough to hold it in place. It won't rattle around, make noise or anything like that, and it will ground properly. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. Take that sticker off. So this tab of the ECU bracket fits into that plastic slot, and then this part of the ECU bracket has to go towards the back of this body bracket. I'll get this guy in first. All right, this will be a little tricky. Lining the screw up through the two brackets and threading it. They're lined up. I just got to get them to thread. All right, I think it's going now. Time for the wrench. Okay, that's snug. Not going anywhere. Not rattling. Everything's where it should be. Okay, let's give her a test. They're working. Well, I'm happy to have my mirrors working again, but I don't understand why my sensor output readings are all over the place. Maybe the magnets have gotten weaker, or perhaps the mirror position sensors have become less reliable over time. And if so, will they damage the new ECU? All I can do is keep my fingers crossed that my mirrors continue to work. If they fail again, I'll post a follow-up video. Thanks for watching.